Okay, so the shift which takes place is, for some of us, at least if you're looking forward, was unpredictable and I don't want to use the word dramatic, but it's just so totally different from everything we've been doing till this point in the Torah that you kind of have to ask yourself, so how did we get here, or what are we doing here, and what is going on? On the other hand, if you start to look backwards, then maybe it's not as strange as, again, on some level one could formulate it, and maybe things are a little bit clearer. So what I'm going to do today is essentially the same thing that I do always, and that is take two things that we don't understand and claim that one answers the other. But this time I'm going to do it to a whole other level, because I'm going to take like a whole bunch of things we don't understand and then claim that they're all connected to one another, and that this is this whole realm which really makes perfect sense. So let's begin in the beginning, which is source number one, which of course is not the very beginning of the Parsha, but is where the whole beginning is leading towards. And it says, V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham, which means, why is it that you take Terumah and zahav, kesef, and nechoshet? I mean, what is the need for all of these raw materials and these things? Why? Ultimately, why? Because it says, V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. That what is the reason is because you're going to be making a mikdash. Now, the concept of a mikdash, the word mikdash, the idea of a mishkan, all of these things are to a certain extent foreign to us. Again, till this point, it's something which we would not have necessarily have predicted. And part of what I want to try to think about will be the very concept of something which is holy. Again, if we follow the Rashi in the beginning of Kedoshim, that Kedoshim to you, Perushim to you, is that holiness means separateness. It means something which is different, something which is set off. On the other hand, I don't think I can get really to a definition of something which is holy without having God in the sentence, which means there has to be something godliness about something which is holy, and at least from our perspective. And therefore, even here, Va'asu li mikdash, God is speaking, make for me a mikdash, v'shachanti bitocham. So the whole idea that God's Shekhinah can somehow rest in a place, so that's what I said, is that we're dealing with things that we really can't properly understand. But we use a word or a concept which I think all of us know, that we can't be taking it overly literally, and that word is heaven, which means, where is God? So now, okay, God is everywhere, right? So where is God? Oh, God is in heaven. Where is heaven? And, again, some of us are aware that the same way that if you go up in a plane or you go up in a spaceship, you should not expect to see God, in the same sense that if you do surgery on somebody, you shouldn't expect to see the soul, because when you're dealing with spiritual constructs, so then they operate in different kinds of dimensions. And the kind of a dimension that something which is spiritual operates in is not necessarily a dimension which we can easily understand. And forget about even being able to quantify, qualify. It's something which is outside of our realm. So therefore, this requires from us, every step that we take now moving forward requires from us humility, and requires, taking very small steps and trying to understand what it is which is taking place. But again, we're talking about somehow some type of an interaction with the divine. And again, that's that first pasuk. V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti betocham. And I can then say, so what in the world does any of that mean for us in a practical level? So that's why I'm saying it's not going to be all that simple. But once again, God is asking, commanding us to do something. And again, I can use words, I can put sentences together, I can say things that we can even imagine make some sense, but we still have to recognize that there's something over here, which is, we're dealing with a completely different realm, which is beyond us. So essentially God is saying to us who live and abide in this physical world, somehow make room for something which is spiritual. Now, what happens when we do that? What is the nature of this place, this thing? Is it, ex territoria, which means, this is God's embassy, as it were, over here? Do the rules of heaven apply? And now even my use of the word heaven, that's what I started to say before. It's not necessarily something which is higher up on top of us, even though we use certain metaphors. And then to what extent are the metaphors that we use representative of something which deals with reality, or metaphors that deal with something to acknowledge it's beyond us, it's above us, it's something which we really can't properly understand. The second pasuk, Kechol asher ani mar'eh otcha et tavnit hamishkan ve'tavnit kol kelah v'chein ta'asu. That everything that I'm going to show you, that's what you need to do. Now, the other thing that we need to pay attention to is to what extent is the beginning of chapter 25 separated from the end of chapter 24. Because the end of chapter 24, or let's put it a little differently, chapter 24 ends with Moshe going up the mountain, or going. Now again, if I would have said, "Oh, Moshe goes up to heaven," you would have said, "Oh, yeah, that's okay." If I go, Moshe goes up the mountain, you would have said, "Okay." And to what extent am I even correct in saying this? That the mountain and the heaven, because again, both of them are dealing about something which is going up. So is this literal? Is it a metaphor? Well, he's going up the mountain, but what happens when he gets to the summit of the mountain? What exactly is there? Is it just the mountaintop, or is it something else? So we'll keep that in mind. We'll see a little bit more about that in a moment. But when we continue, but the important thing over here is that Moshe visualizes something, and he's told that what it is that you're going to make is going to be based upon that visualization. Source number 2 is later on in the same chapter, and here it's talking about the making of the menorah. Va'asita et nerotea shiv'ah ve'ela et nerotea va'ir al ever paneho u'melkacheo u'machtotea zahav tahor kikar zahav tahor yaseh et kol ha'kelim ha'ele u're'eh va'aseh. Again, the visualization. You're going to see this, and then you're going to do it. Betavnitam asher ata mar'a bahar. That which you see, and this is betavnitam, right? Something which is, it sounds as if it were physical, but I don't know how I can talk about something which is spiritual, which is physical, because I understand when the physical is done, when the spiritual is done on this world, there's a physical body to it. But I know I'm talking too much, but maybe even you're understanding what I'm saying is, what in the world is going on? Because in both of these descriptions now, in terms of the whole general thing, and now regarding meaning the whole general thing which will be built, which will be the Mishkan, it's as, you're going to see. There's going to be a visualization. And regarding the various things inside, it's going to be based upon this visualization that you're going to see on the mountain, right? Up on the mountain, something's going to be seen. If you're not convinced after 2 of these examples, look at source number 3. And this is still in this week's Parsha, in Perek Kavchet, the Briach HaTichon, Vakrashim, and so on. Vakrashim Titzapeh Zahav, again. V'hakimota et HaMishkan, kimishpato, asher hara'ita bahar. As you've seen on the mountain, which all of this should lead us to a simple question. So what exactly is Moshe seeing on the mountain? So does God know how to make holograms? Okay, I guess that was a bad question. Which means, what exactly is Moshe seeing when he's there? Because I understand the practical side of all of this, that you can have an architect who's going to give you all of the dimensions of what should be built, but it makes it much easier if you make a model of it, and then you have the model, and then the dimensions, and now you know that this is what I'm building, right, the model, and these are the dimensions that model is going to be, and all that makes perfect sense. And that, I'm saying that's why all of this is so simple, except for one thing. What is it that Moshe is constantly seeing over here? And again, I could show you commentaries that say that, okay, that's exactly what Bezalel does, that Moshe shares with Bezalel the dimensions and shares with him what it is that he sees. He shares somehow that visual, but we'll pause it there. So again, I just hope that you now understand that these various examples, right, and there are 4 of them over here, all of them are pointing in the same direction, that going up above then generates some kind of a visual, which then somehow is going to be concretized down here below, but what is down here below is in some sense connected to what exists above. Now, all of that I really hope makes sense, and all that I'm going to do the rest of the time that we have today is saying the same thing again and again and again, and just trying to make it a little bit more convincing as we move on. Now, what I'd said a couple moments ago was that it would seem quite natural to move from the end of last week's Parsha and then just see how it flows into the beginning of this week's Parsha. So the end of last week's Parsha, of course, is chapter 24, Perek of Daled. Among the various things that happen, Perek Kaf Dalet, I'm not doing everything. I'm starting deliberately on Pasuk Tet, in source number 5. Vaya'al, so right there I want to pause a second. The word Vaya'al, what does it mean? It means to go up. Vaya'al. So right over here again, we have some kind of a vertical movement that's important. Because everything till now has been about this vertical connection. So Vaya'al Moshe v'Aaron nadaviu v'shiv miziknei Yisrael. So aside from just Moshe going up, we have now a whole contingent who are going up, Vayiru, and now again they have a vision, which means at the time that this happened, I don't think any of us, right, end of last week's Parsha, I don't think any of us, we get to this point here and say, oh, that's so interesting, because this is really preparing us for what's going to happen in next week's Parsha. So I'm going to say it again. We didn't see next week's Parsha coming, or that's this week's by this point. We didn't see that coming, but now just look what's taking place over here. Look what's taking place over here. You have some kind of going up. You then have a vision. So let's read the vision now a little bit more carefully. Vayiru et Elokei Yisrael. Now, I don't know what that means. That's what I told you. I'm just going to keep on throwing in things. I have no idea what they mean. What does it mean that they somehow have this appreciation of seeing something, of seeing a God who's non-physical? So what is it they say? Vayiru et Elokei Yisrael v'tachat raglav k'maseh levnat hasapir uke'etzem hashamayim l'tohar. So I'm not going to insult you and try to translate that into English, because what difference is it going to make? Because you're looking at me like I'm crazy. Because even if I put it into words, those words are not going to encapsulate what it is that they actually saw. They saw something which was divine. They saw something which was enlightening. They saw something which was spiritually uplifting. What else do you want me to say? Okay, I could really translate all those words. I just don't know what it means.
Translate it?
No. Because then you'll think you understand it. No, I'm saying that's the problem. There's a sapphire over here. Right? Okay, now you got it? Okay. That's why I don't want to translate it. To the very depths of heaven, the purity of the depths of... I don't know what those words mean. Yes, I can try to translate them. I just don't know what it means, but I do know something. I know that they climb the mountain and they have a vision. And then it continues. And there's so many commentaries on what happened there, that God does not strike the princes of Israel, as it were, and they see God and they eat and they drink. And by the way, there's some commentators, no, they didn't eat, they drank. They got sated as if they'd eat and drinking, because they got sated from the spiritual, and therefore they were completely, they had no more needs at that moment, because every need that they possibly had was filled because of the spiritual experience they just now had. So I'm going to say it again. I can read all these words for you. I just don't have any idea what any of it means, but I want to continue. V'yomer Hashem el Moshe, alei alai hahara, ve'yesham. So now we're going further. So Moshe, separate from those who've already climbed somewhat up. Now you're going to continue going up the mountain. And then you are going to receive something which is quite divine. Right? What is it? It's the luchot. You're going to receive, again, you could just say it's rocks. It's not just rocks. You can say just stone. It's not just stone. It's stone which has the word of God engraved in it. Vayakam Moshe v'Yeshua misharto v'Ya'al Moshe. Again, you notice all the Vaya'als that have been over here. And Moshe goes up, El Har Elokim. He goes up, El Har Elokim, to the mountain of God. Ve'el Zekinim Amar Shuvu Lanu Bazeh Ad Asher Nashuv Alechem. You wait until we return. V'nei Aaron v'Chor Yimachem. And Aaron and Chor will be there with you. Mibal Dvrim Yigash Aleihem. And if any issues may come up, go talk to them. Okay, so we're not going there right now. Vaya'al Moshe El Hahar. Again, Vaya'al. Again, we keep having going up. We keep. Again, that's part of what I wanted to point out, is that this idea of climbing and going and moving is constantly here. Vaya'al Moshe El Hahar. V'yichas Anan Et Hahar. And a cloud encompasses the mountain. Vayishkon, that's such an interesting word, Vayishkon, because what does Vayishkon mean over here? Vayishkon kavod Hashem al Har Sinai. Vayishkon, the Shekhinah descends, or Vayishkon kavod Hashem, the glory of God comes down on the mountain. But now you're going to find out that in a couple of verses from now, we're going to be told V'chuli Terumah, and you're going to be told Vasuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. And again, I'm just going to ask, and then he's going to be told, and how do you do it? All the things that you're seeing on the mountain. So where's Moshe? Moshe is presumably up on the mountain. And what is Moshe seeing when he's up on the mountain? Moshe is seeing the Shekhinah, the Kavod Hashem. Now, I'll say it again. Do I understand any of the words that I'm saying? To a certain extent. Do I have any idea what this is that he's saying? Clearly, no. So we proceed with caution. Yes? Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai, vayachaseo anan, sheshet yamim, the cloud descends for 6 days, vayikra el Moshe b'yom hashvi'i mitoch anan. And then on the 7th day is when the spiritual takes place. By the way, that's really interesting, because one of the only things that we know about heaven till this point is that there is a mun factory in the heaven that works for 6 days of the week and doesn't work on the 7th day. And over here, for 6 days of the week, there's silence, but then the spiritual conversation takes place on the 7th day. So again, I don't know what day of the week this is, but I'm going to say it again, that's interesting that you have the 6 days of, it's almost like the 6 days of rest, or it's really the 6 days of preparation, and then you're up to the 7th day. So maybe that's really what we do all week. It's 6 days of preparation, and then we can get to that 7th day of the spiritual experience. Continue. Pasuk Yud Zayin. Umar'eh Kvod Hashem. So he sees something. There's a vision. Should I repeat myself and say this again? I'm going to. That while we were reading all of this last week, I don't think any of us were thinking, oh, look at this. This is all preparation for what's going to come next. But now when you look backwards, did I kind of convince you that maybe this is where we should be paying attention? Because it constantly deals with up on the mountain, visions of something taking place. Let's read this pasuk. Even from below, the people see something and there's some kind of an epiphany. Moshe goes to the mountain. Once again, the word Vaya'al el Har. So you have to again ask, how many times did we just now have Vaya'al? How much climbing is over here taking place? V'hi Moshe Bahar arba'im yom v'arba'im layla. And Moshe was there for 40 days and 40 nights. Good? Yeah. Everything now is perfectly clear? Right? The Mishkan. You anticipated the Mishkan? The Mishkan you didn't anticipate. All that you anticipated till now is that Moshe is going to come down with a luchot. That's you had no reason to look for anything else. My point is now, when you go backwards, all of those times that it speaks about, and this is what you're going to build this like you saw on the mountain, like you saw on the mountain, like you saw on the mountain. So now you say, hold it. Now Moshe must have seen some things on the mountain. Where do we ever see that Moshe saw things on the mountain? Well, constantly saying that there is things which are being revealed over there on the mountain. Give me a couple of minutes. I'm going to try to make a little bit more. I'm unaccustomed for somebody saying, excuse me for interrupting. I don't know where I am. Even with Rashi, we need to be very, very careful. But let's just say for now. So yes, I'm guilty of reading this as the Ramban would like us to read it. Essentially, say, read the next pasuk as if the previous one came before it. Guilty, right? But we also notice something else. Forget about that. This is a direct sequence. Thematically, this flows very, very nicely. Put it in water, they stop. Okay, no, but my point is that not only sequentially does this come immediately afterwards, which is mostly what the Ramban is saying. The Ramban also, and he says it black and white, he says thematically it's the same idea. Yes, I just now showed you why you should believe what the Ramban said, although I didn't even show you all of his evidence. He's much more concerned at the very end of the book, the very end of Shemot, end of Pekudei, where the verses are almost identical, but I'm just showing you, just following the flow. Oh yeah, this makes a great deal of sense. Let's continue. I also want to note, because I didn't get to the point that I really want to say it, but let's say it already, we'll get it out of the way. Apparently, I'm just connecting the dots now. Apparently, when Moshe is up in heaven, he sees the Beit Hamikdash. Apparently, he sees the Beit Hamikdash and he sees all the kelim. I'm just pointing out that there's a turn of phrase that comes up in Bamidbar, which obviously may not be connected whatsoever, but just thinking in terms of this juxtaposition makes it a little more interesting, and that's in source number 6. This is in the end of Parshat Balotcha. Here, there's also some kind of an epiphany. This is when they're saying Lashon Hara about Moshe, right, where his siblings are teaming up against him. Vayered Hashem ba'amud anan, vayamod petach ha'oel, vayikra Aaron u'Miriam, vayitzu shneim, vayom Shemuna dvaraya, im yen v'yachem Hashem b'mara elav, v'tvader b'chalom ha'deber bo, which means, no, your quality of vision is not... So what's interesting here is there were these 70 prophets at this point, and they too say, oh, no, we're prophets as well. And God says, no, your eyes, now spiritual eyes, have not seen what Moshe has seen. And I'm so intrigued with Pasuk Zayin now, again, through this particular connection, Lo kein avdi Moshe b'chol beiti ne'emanhu. Just that turn of phrase, Beiti. Why use the word bayit over here? And I'll say, see, when we started today, we were talking about Vasudi Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, that you're going to make a Mikdash, a Mishkan down below, and I will dwell within it. And now we have a verse that we completely ignored. We never asked ourselves, why is that word being used over here? Which is a description of God. When it's a description, oh, Moshe, yeah, he's like a ben bayit by me in my house. Well, where? Well, it's talking exactly about Moshe's greater ability of having a prophetic experience. Well, when was Moshe's greatest ability of a prophetic experience? And that would be when Moshe goes up above. And again, I'm just pointing out now, wow, the word Beiti was used in that particular context. That is interesting. But as I said, I told you from the beginning, I'm just taking everything we don't understand and kind of throwing it together and saying that they're all connected. Good. In source number 7, is obviously the place where all of this begins, because maybe we didn't pay attention enough, but we're going to get to, again, a really clear point as we continue. This is when Yaakov, and maybe it's significant when Yaakov is running away, when Yaakov is about to leave the land of Israel, that something takes place, Vayifga b'makom, which Chazal say means he davened in that place. That's where we get the Yaakov daven Marav. Vayifga b'makom. So maybe during davening, something actually was triggered. But then he goes to sleep. Which is also interesting. He takes from the stones and he builds something, which we all would have ignored. But he builds something to sleep. Now, once again, we'll point out the word sulam is a word that we don't know what it means because it's only used once in the entire text. We imagine it means a ladder, and presumably it's some kind of a connection between heaven and earth. By the way, pause right there. That's really interesting because any connection between heaven and earth is interesting. Chazal already point out that Sulam and Sinai have the same gematria, and that's one of the few gematrias which are pointed out by Chazal. They're telling you, oh, here are both places. It's not just the numbers. Here are places where heaven and earth somehow get connected. Because again, God comes down on Sinai. By Sinai, Moshe goes up. Here is, by the way, think now again that angels go up and down. Who's the angels? By the way, there's one midrash that says, oh, the angel, that's Aaron, the Kohen, going up the ramp to the Mizbeach, which just then connected the Sulam to the Beit Hamikdash. Well, why? Why would you connect that? Why would you say it's the ramp? Or now I can say, oh, that's the ability of Moshe to go up. Oh, I know, you think it sort of said angels, but what's an angel? What exactly? An emissary of God. A Kohen is an emissary. Well, who's a Kohen? Machlok in the Gemara. Is a Kohen an emissary of God, or is he an emissary of OUisrael? And the Gemara answers yes. That's the answer of the Gemara. Is Moshe an emissary of God, or is he emissary of the people? Which would, right? And again, you could say yes. Is Moshe a shliach for God to bring the Torah down, or is he a shliach from the people to receive the Torah? So again, you realize that there's a really interesting connection over here, but we didn't even start it yet. All that we got to was the Sulam, and it says it's Mutzav Artza, it's connected to the ground. V'Rosham Magia Shemaima. So again, we get to heaven. Now, Shemaim, does Shemaim literally mean the stratosphere, or we're dealing with the spiritual construct? Are angels going up, hanging out outside, where planes are, with all of the planes driving by at that point, flying by? Would they all have seen the angels, or we're dealing with a different kind of construct? So that's again going to be our problem, is that then God is on top of this. I don't want to just skip over the blessings. We love the blessings. והנה אנוכי עמך ושמרתיך בכל אשר תלך והשיבתיך אל האדמה הזאת כי לא אעזבך עד אשר אם עשיתי את אשר דיברתי לך. Yes, you're going to exile. You're going to become incredibly numerous, and you're going to come back home. Okay, yes, that is a part of our story. That's a part of the story of the Jewish people. V'yikatz Yaakov mishnato, Yaakov wakes up. Vayomer, he says, God is in this place. The word makom is probably something we should pay attention to. Sometimes God is called hamakom, and that's also interesting. V'yira, he was filled with awe. Vayomer, manora makom hazeh, how awesome is this place. Ein zeki im Beit Elokim. So he just now said it. He goes, oh, part of his epiphany is that he comes to this realization that this is the Beit Elokim, which means here we see the concept of a Beit Elokim, V'zer Shara Shamayim. And what in the world does that mean, Zer Shara Shamayim? This is the gates of heaven, so give me a couple seconds. Vayashkem Yaakov v'boki v'kach et ha'even asher sami rashotav, and he takes, I told you, he already built something there with the rock, now he takes it, v'yosem oto matzeva, and he builds some kind of a matzeva, memorial perhaps, v'yitzok shemen al rosha, and he pours oil, which is anointing. Right? What is Mashiach? Is that you pour oil, you anoint. V'yikra shem makomahu Beit El. This is the house of God. Luz, v'ulam Luz shema ir l'rishona. It would once been called Luz. V'yidar Yaakov neder. Yaakov makes a vow. Leimor in yeh Elokim imadi u'shmani b'derech asher enochi aleich v'natan li lechem lechol beged levosh v'shavti b'shalom o Beit Avi v'yashem li l'Elokim. That if I really truly come back, then he says, then this whole enterprise of building a house for God, of somehow the ladder which connects heaven and earth, or earth and heaven, somehow that's going to be manifest. Now, the reason I mention all of this is, look at this. The Mishkan should not have come as a surprise. Yaakov made a neder a long time ago. To build a house for God should not have been a surprise. This is not a totally alien concept that only takes place because that we made an egel at some point. No, it's something which was in Yaakov's spiritual consciousness long, long before that. But it's Rashi in source number 8, which is the real reason that we're here. Rashi notes, V'zeh shar hashamayim, mokum tefila la'alot tefilatam hashamayma. This is the place that the tefillot go up. And that is so interesting. Because again, God is not a physical construct and heaven is not necessarily physical. But he discerns, again, the ladder and again, the malachim going up and coming down, that this is the place that things go up. And then Rashi continues and he says that is pshat. Zeshar Shemayim. Umidrasho. And we're going to be a little careful as we proceed over here. To what extent does Rashi take this midrash as pshat as well? Right over here, I admit that he just says umidrasho, but midrasho doesn't necessarily mean that he thinks that this is just some other kind of concept. Question is this the pshat in this pasuk? Umidrasho shebeit hamikdash shel mala michuvan keneged beit hamikdash shel mata. That there is a heavenly Beit HaMikdash and there is an earthly Beit HaMikdash. And now we have to ask ourselves all over again, so what did Yaakov see? When Yaakov looks up and he sees something and then he concludes, I need to build a Beit HaMikdash down over here, what gave him that idea? Which means, does Yaakov below, or maybe there's some kind of an ascension of Yaakov as well during this experience, somehow Yaakov may have gone through an experience which is remarkably similar to the experience that Moshe goes through, where Moshe sees the various, first he sees the Mishkan, he sees the Kelim, and therefore he knows how to do it. Does Yaakov see something and now he knows he has to do it? Which means, yes, I took a difficult dream of Yaakov, I took a difficult verse with Moshe, and what am I claiming? Yeah, these are connected. But you know why I'm claiming that they're connected. Why? Because they're connected, and Rashi helped us a lot. We're going to take a little bit of a detour, which is not a detour, which we'll actually see where some of this is part of the halachic reality that we deal with. Correct. Which, if I had time, I would have dealt with that as well, but we don't. Yes, correct. In source number 9, we have a Mishnah in Masechet Brachot. The Mishnah begins, Hayarochiv ala chamor, you're riding along on your donkey. Don't have any messianic, declarations because of this. Hayarochiv ala chamor, and it comes time to daven. Yered, you should come down. Im enu yochol lered, yachzor et panav, So let's just pause there for a moment. First of all the people who, when mincha time comes, stop on. You can get a minyan, by the way, on some of the roads in Israel. That mincha time comes, people all getting off on the side of the roads. It's extremely dangerous, and they're better off davening later in a safe place. They're better off not getting out of the car. They're better off pulling over in a place which is actually safe. And if you want, I'll say clearly, it's usher to daven in a place that your life is in danger, and you're putting yourself in danger. It's just not allowed. Which I know it's right. I'm a rabbi. It's right. But look how interesting this is. And by the way, if you want to extrapolate from here, if you're on a plane, should you gather a bunch of people and make a minyan and bother all the other people? You have no right to do it. It is literally a mitzvah b'ali de avera. It's something which is absolutely not allowed. And what do? You sit in your seat. But what if you're not facing the right way? Can we read this Mishnah again? There's a Mishnah. What do the Mishnah say that you do? Hayarochev ala chamor, right? It could be a 747 or whatever they have today, or bus or whatever they have today. Hayarochev ala chamor yered. If you can, get off the plane. Okay, you can't. Continue. Im enu yachol yered yachzir panav. Now that's interesting. What does that mean? Yachzir et panav. V'im enu yachol yachzir et panav yechavein et libo keneged Beit Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now this turn of phrase, yechavein et libo, is that a physical or is that a spiritual construct? It sounds to me very, very spiritual, which kind of like you close your eyes and yechavein et libo, and your orientation, your focus is as if you're standing outside of the Beit Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. Hayoshev b'sfina o ba'asada, which is a small boat. Yechavein libo keneged Kodesh HaKadoshim. And again, various places. What do? You focus on the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now, let's look at the way that the Talmud Bavli then unpacks all of this. Tanu Rabbanan, Suma, somebody who's blind, or somebody doesn't know the direction. Now that's interesting because we weren't clear if the Mishnah ever mentioned directionality as much as it mentioned spirituality. Did the Mishnah say you need to face that place, or the Mishnah you need to focus on that place? So over here it says if you're blind or you don't know which direction you're in, right? So what do? Yechavein libo keneged aviv shabashamayim. Then you focus your heart, which really means your mind, your spirituality. You focus it on Avinu Shabbat Shemayim. Where is that? Well, Shabbat Shemayim. Where's Shemayim? Well, now we get stuck again. Shenamar, and so on and so forth. You know what's really interesting here? It didn't necessarily say, I know that Rishonim can say that that's what it means, but it didn't necessarily say that you need to face that direction. Rather, what did it say? Yechavein et libo, keneged Eretz Yisrael, shenemar, and so on. Yechavein et libo, right? If you are omid be'Eretz Yisrael, yechavein et libo, keneged Yerushalayim. Omid b'Yerushalayim, yechavein et libo, keneged Beit Hamikdash. Now, one of the reasons to argue that it really does mean directionality is it should have been the same in all the situations. It should have always been you just focus on God. Why in Israel you focus on Yerushalayim, in Yerushalayim you focus there. So it does sound like there is some kind of direction as well. So I know why people can claim that that's what it means, and I'm not discounting at all. I'm just saying is that the term here is actually much more interesting. Hayomid bebeit kodshei hakadoshim yechavein et libo keneged Beit hakaporet. Hayomid acharei Beit hakaporet yireh atzmo keilu lefnei hakaporet. Nimtza omid b'mizrach machzir panav l'marav, marav machzir panav l'mizrach, b'derom machzir panav l'tzafon, b'tzafon machzir panav l'derom. Nimtzu kol Yisrael mechavnin et libam l'makom echad. That all Jews are focusing on one place, and I'll say it again: is this a physical place, a spiritual place? So we'll leave that. Amar Rabbi Avin, Vitem Rabbi Avina, Maikra. What's the verse that supports this? Kimigdal David Savarech Banoi Talpiot. Tal Shakol Pinot Ponimpo. A tal is a tel, which is a mound where all of our prayers are focused on that same place. In source number 11, we have the Yerushalmi unpacking the same source. The Yerushalmi here says, Tani was taught, Sumo misheni yachol lechavein et haruchot, harei elu mitpalim klape lema'alan. So notice right away, above. Shenemar v'tpalu el Hashem. Omdim mitpalim b'chutz la'aretz, hofchim et pneim klape Eretz Yisrael. Right? Somebody, omdim mitpalim b'Eretz Yisrael, hofchim et pneim klape Yerushalayim. Now this is all physical. It's much more interesting. The Yerushalmi clearly says the direction. It didn't say chavein et liba, right? It says, Hovchim et pneihim klape Yerushalayim. the Yerushalmi says where you should be facing. It then continues, ha'omdim u'mitpalel b'Yerushalayim, hofchim pneim klapei harabayit. And by the way, I would also be willing to say, the Bavli and Yerushalmi don't argue. The Yerushalmi is clarifying, and therefore we take the clear Yerushalmi to also explain the Bavli. We're going to skip a little bit, and eventually it's going to say, Amar Yeshua ben Levi, that's the first word of the line, Hu heichal lefnei v'lefnim, heichal shakol panim ponim lo, ad kadun bevinyano. The idea that you face in that direction when the Beit Hamikdash is standing, we understand. But what about when it's destroyed? Where do you face when there is no Beit Hamikdash? Why should we be facing towards Yerushalayim? By the way, if you're going to tell me the Yaakov Sulam, which goes Shara Shamayim, and that's where, then I understand. But over here it says, but there's no Beit Hamikdash. What do? Amar Rabbi Ibon. Now you see that this is the same as the Bavli. But noila talpiyot, to tell shakol piyot and palim alav bivracha b'kiryat shma uv'tfilah. It's a place that we constantly refer to in our prayers. Bibracha, that's prayer Karamazon, Bonei Yerushalayim. B'tfilah, Elokei David, Bonei Yerushalayim. B'kiryat shma, Parei Sukkah Shom Aleinu v'Kol OUisrael v'Al Yerushalayim. By the way, our custom is to say that Friday night. There was actually, this is one of the differences between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. In Chutz La'aretz, 7 days a week they would say Shemar Yisrael La'ad. In Israel, 7 days a week they would say this bracha about Pares Sukkot Shalom Alein V'Kol Yisrael V'Yerushalayim. Our custom became a compromise that 6 days of the week we do the physical Shemar Yisrael La'ad, but on Shabbat we do Minhag Eretz Yisrael, and we do what they would have done all 7 days of the week. So I'm saying this is not an accident. That's what we say. And Yerushalayim is therefore always mentioned. That there's a higher sense of Yerushalayim in Israel. No, maybe we could understand that. We'll continue a little bit. Katuv echad omer elecha shuva el mekomi. V'katuv echad omer v'yu einei v'libi sham kol yamim. Haketzad panav lamala v'libo lamata. V'im lav yechavin et libo keneged Beit Kodesh HaKadoshim. La'eza Beit Kodesh, which is, again, it goes back to this problem. If there's no Beit HaMikdash, what Kodesh HaKadoshim is there? Reb Chia Rabba keneged Kodshei HaKadoshim Shamala. That we still daven towards the Beit HaMikdash in heaven. Reb Shimon Bar Chalifta Amar keneged Beit HaKadosh Shalamatan. Amar Pinchas lo pligi Beit Kodesh Shamata mechaven keneged Beit Kodesh Shamalan. So now I'll explain all this. I just want to go back to the Rashi a second. What did Rashi say? Zer Shara Shamayim. He says that Yaakov realizes that this is the place that links between the Beit HaMikdash Shamala and the Beit HaMikdash Shamata, which the Yerushalmi is telling is the reality. So when we daven, where do we face? We face towards the Beit Kodesh HaKadoshim, to the Holy of Holies. Well, which one? The one in heaven, the one on earth? He says it's the same thing, because the one in heaven is right located by that same place. Again, how high up, I can't tell you. How high up in heavens, I can't say. And I'm going to admit again, I have no idea how to describe any of this more than what we're reading right here. But nonetheless, this, again, if you're wondering how we got here, Moshe is told, build it as you saw on the mountain. Bill saw what we saw on the mountain. So what does Moshe see on the mountain? So I'm saying all these are psukim. You can't really move away. If you want, you can say what I said before. God created a temporary hologram for Moshe to be able to see, and now he knows how to build it. But that's not the way that Chazal are taking it. Chazal are taking this in the sense that, no, there is some kind of a spiritual reality which Moshe is able to discern and able to see, and is referenced constantly in terms of when Moshe is down here below, that there is that spiritual experience. Let's take this a little bit more. In source number 12, there's a nice pasuk. Source number 12, in Parshat Mishpatim, Hinei Anochi Shleich Malach Lefanecha. So that again is interesting, because you have your malach here, L'shamrecha b'derech u'leveyecha el hamakom asher hachinoti, to bring you to the place that I prepared. So Rashi here writes, Asher hachinoti, asher zimanti l'teit lechem, which I prepared for you. Which the place I prepared? So it's Eretz Yisrael, generally. Zeo pshuto, and now Rashi is going to do it again. Umidrasho, but nonetheless there is a midrash. El makom asher hachinoti kvar mekomi keneged v'zeh achad min hamikraot she'omrim shebeit hamikdash shomala mechuvan keneged shomata. He goes, this is one of the verses which indicates. So it's interesting because when he said it the first time by the Shara Shamayim, he said as if this is Pshat, this is in Midrash. And now you see that Rashi doesn't necessarily think this is no. He thinks that there are various psukim which point toward this reality. In source number 14, there's a verse which is not that dissimilar to what we just now saw. This is the middle of the Shira. To the Emu v'titienu b'har nachlatcha mechon l'shivtecha pulat Hashem mikdash Hashem konenu yadecha. But now you see that that's much clearer. Mikdash Hashem konenu yadecha. The Mikdash Hashem is somehow prepared by your hands. So what does it mean? It's prepared. Konenu. What's again? That's what Asher Echinoti in the verse before. So the Rashi here that I'm bringing is a Rashi in the Gemara in Sukkah. It's also Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Rashi says this. The Gemara was discussing about when Mashiach could come and when the Beit HaMikdash is going to be built and which day of the week and issues of Shabbat and Yom Tov and so on. And I'm skipping there in the middle of this Rashi. Hanimile binyan habanoi bidei Adam aval mikdash ha'atid she'anu mitzapim bonoi u'mishuchlalhu Yigalev Yavo Min Hashamayim Shene'amar Mikdash Hashem Konenu Yadecha. So this is phenomenal. It means that during the Shira, the people all had this experience. And I want to remind you of something. There is a Mechilta that says that and Ramban quotes the Mechilta that the people experienced it. Even Afilu Shifcha Layam experienced what even the greatest of prophets like Yecheskel. By the way, it's going to be very important. Yecheskel. It eluded him, but why Yecheskel? And there's also some versions, Yeshayahu, Yecheskel. They're both really important in this discussion. What Yecheskel saw, which means, and now you go specifically, what is it they saw, right? They say, Zeh Keli Van Vehu. They're pointing a finger. What do they see? Well, just like Moshe goes up and sees something, what is it they saw? So over here, you understand Rashi is saying that they saw the Beit HaMikdash above. Now, what's more remarkable about this Rashi is that this is the famous argument, if you're familiar, between Rashi and the Rambam. The Rambam makes it sound that Mashiach is going to have to build the third Beit HaMikdash, and Rashi is saying, no, the third Beit HaMikdash is just waiting to come down. It's there. Which means that at some point there becomes this moment where humanity gets to this point where heaven and earth are much more connected, and that reality which takes place in heaven is able to somehow to be manifest over here below. But even I'll read the Rambam just in a second, because even the Rambam maybe is more interesting than we think. Look at source number 20, and then we'll go backwards a second. Binyan Rambam Hilchot Beit HaBechira Binyan Shabana Shlomo Kfar Mufarash B'Melachim V'chein Binyan Atid Libanot Afal Pi Shehu Katuv B'Yecheskel Einu Mefurash Umuvurar V'Anshei Beit Shah, which means we don't know exactly what the Beit Shlishi is going to be like, but it's part of the vision of Yecheskel, which is very interesting, because Yecheskel sees the Beit HaMikdash. That's part of what Yecheskel sees. He also sees the Merkavah. Now, what's the connection between the beginning of Yecheskel, when he's off in Galut, and he sees this Merkavah, right, this chariot, and then later on when he sees dimensions of this Beit HaMikdash, which the Rambam is telling, that's the third Beit HaMikdash that he sees. So now if we'll go back a little bit, underneath source 17, I left out the title. I'd moved it, and then I think I got called away for a second. I didn't put in the title. I just got messed up. Where it says Vaya'al me'alav Elokim, so that's the Kli Yakar. Sorry. First, sorry. Let me do this. The 17. Let's go back to 17 for 1 second. The 17 that we wanted. First, we'll go back to 16. Okay. Vayal alav makom. Vayal me'alav Elokim b'makom asher diber ito. V'yitzev Yaakov matzeva b'makom. Right, asher diber ito. Matzevat Evan v'yisach alav nisach v'yisach alav Shem. And v'yikra Yaakov v'shem makom asher diber ito Shem Elokim Beit El. So that source 16 is when Yaakov comes back. When Yaakov comes back, what does he do? He builds this thing. God tells him to build it. Where by Beit El, he builds something. He puts up a matzeva, and he said he's going to build a Beit Elokim. Here, it used the word b'makom. Vayom elav Elokim b'makom. God went up from this makom. Rashi writes b'makom asher diber ito. Rashi tells us, Eini yodeya ma melamdenu. He goes, I don't know what it's coming to teach us. Now, right underneath that, the next line, Vayal me'alav Elokim, that's the Kli Yakar on the same pasuk. So Kli Yakar writes, "V'yalmei alav Elokim b'makom asher diber ito." Pirish Rashi and Yodea ma balam deni. He says, I don't know what this is actually coming to teach us. The linira sheba lilamdenu shahavot hein hamerkava. Now I don't know if you know to begin what to do with that. The avot are somehow this spiritual way of connecting to heaven. The Beit Hamikdash shel mata mechuvan keneged Beit Hamikdash shel mala ki yadua sheYaakov v'Yakshav v'Beit El luz v'sham shara shamayim. So he says, I don't know why Rashi says I don't know what's going on over here. Of course Rashi knows what's going on over here because the Kli Yakar says I know what's going on over here, and Rashi had already said this previously. So in source 18, the Siftei Chacham is going to try to explain. He's going to say right away, Avagav de Bereshit Rabba lamdu mizeh pasoka avot heinin Merkava. He says that it could be that Rashi's troubled. Why did you need the word makom multiple times? He's referring to source 19. Amalo, one second. Vayalu kimei al Avraham, Amaresh Lakish, avot heinin Merkava. Shenema vayalu kimei al Avraham, vayal mei alav Elokim, v'Hashem nitzav alav, which means your various times that God is above them, that somehow this idea of aboveness and being connected to heaven is connected to the avot as well. So how far can we get today? Let's go to the next page. I'm reading over here in the Sefer Tamei HaMinhagim, which is a great book which explains all kinds of customs. And you see the part in bold where he writes, Mukublani, Bimori, Vizikni, whatever, Zechet Tzadik Levracha, Bal HaMachaber Sefer Yismach Moshe. That's from the title bound, Yismach Moshe, I believe. V'tshuva Hishiv Moshe, Ki Pam Echad, Shesiyem Tefila Shmona Esrei, Allah B'libo Litpalel Lerot Hadavar Hanal, Ha'amur Ba'asera Amamarot, that's a Kabbalistic book, Rabbi Menachem Azariah Defano. Ve'im levavo amar ulai kaimali sha'ata ve'eskel lerato. Maybe I'll be able to see it. We're not sure what it is he wants to see, because we skipped everything till now. V'tekef itpalel al zeh. V'milei Hashem sha'alato. V'ra'a ayin ba'ayin et Eliyahu luvash v'bigdei kahuna. Omeid u'makriv hatamid kisidro. V'dvarav halalu no'ado l'rabim. He said he had a spiritual experience where he had a vision where he saw Eliyahu in heaven. Now, by the way, there's a machloket if Eliyahu is a Kohen or not. So Eliyahu dressed as a Kohen, bringing the offering. If you look at source number 22, Sefer Tamei HaMinhagim, same book, where he writes, Bebeit Hamikdash Shamala uMichael Sar Hagadol Shehu Kohen Lekel Elyon Makriv Hanishamazu LeKorban. Now this part I want to explain a little bit better, and then we'll get to an end, and then we'll try to wrap up a little bit. In the Gemara in Menachot, end of Menachot, in source 23, we're not going to read the whole thing, but it says as follows. We'll go a little bit before the part which is bolded. Amar of Gidol Amarav Zemizbeach Banui uMichael Sar Gadol Omeid uMakriv Alav Korban. Rabbi Yochanan Elu Tamdei Chachamim Moskim Be'ochot Avodah. So this is one of these sources. Avodah Malei Lemakatuv Ki Ilu Navna Hamikdash B'Yameim. So, or continue Amaresh Lakish. Mai dichtiv zot Torah la'olah lemincha lechatat v'lasham kol ha'osik b'Torah ki ilu rekriv olah mincha chatat v'asham. So essentially, we have various authorities telling us that if you study the laws and the ideas behind the Mikdash, it's as if your soul somehow gets above, and as if you're actually doing these things. Actually, the part above is stranger. But along the way, it quoted Rav. Again, Rav learned in the same Beit Midrash as Rav Yochanan, a little bit older than Rav Yochanan. And Rav says that Michael Sar Gadol Omeid Makriv Alav Kurban. So let's look at Tosfot, because Tosfot over here has a tradition, and then we'll also see why this is so relevant. Umichael Sar Gadol Omeid Makriv Alav Kurban. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the Beit Hamikdash Shamala. So just in case you think the Beit Hamikdash Shamala is off in storage, it's like a museum and it's all shut down, got those felt ropes around it and nobody can go in. No, it's operational. And what happens in it? that inside it there is an angel. By the way, remember, our angels go up, our angels go down. There's an angel up above. And which angel? There is Michael. And what is Michael Saragadol doing? He's bringing offerings. So I'm saying that part was the Gemara. Now Tosfot. Midrashot Chalukin Yesh. Midrashot Chalukin. There's different Midrashim regarding this idea. Yesh Misha Omer Nishmoteim Shel Tzadikim. Yesh Misha Omer Kvasim Shel Esh. Some say that what is he offering to God? He's offering the souls of the righteous, and some say he's offering cattle. He's offering kvasim, keves, but of fire, something spiritual. V'hainu damrina b'shmona esrei, v'avoda v'ishei Yisrael utfilatam mehira ba'ava tikabel b'ratzon. V'yesh omrim dekai adeel v'shivat avda l'dvir beitecha v'ishei Yisrael lo matzati yoter. He goes, that's all that I found. I can't say anything else. So let me explain to you what it is that he said. He says that we have a tradition that Michael is doing something above. What is he doing? Is it a purely spiritual construct, and therefore it's a spiritual Beit HaMikdash in heaven? Is it and by the way, Tosfot also accepts the Rashi's position that this Beit HaMikdash will come down at some point. Is it purely spiritual, or is there somehow something more physical connected? Right? When we say Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu, right? V'ishei Yisrael, so how exactly? That when we say V'ishei Yisrael, his question was, how and when do we pause in the prayer itself? Which means that the word V'ishei Yisrael, to Kabel B'ratzon, what he's asking is, that particular turn of phrase, how do we read it, and what kavanah do we have when we read it? So let me read the phrase. Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu ba'amcha Yisrael u'v'tfilatam. May God, the word ritzui actually means, the end of the Haggadah, we have nirtza. What is nirtza? It's a prayer that our prayers are accepted. It's a prayer that our avodah is accepted. After we went through the Shemona Esrei and said all the main parts, Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu ba'amcha Yisrael u'v'tfilatam. Please find Jews and their prayers acceptable. It's a prayer for our prayers. V'heshivet avodah l'dvir beitecha, and may you return the service to the Dvir Beitach, which is the Beit HaMikdash. V'ishei Yisrael utfilatam be'avat tekabel b'ratzon. So his question is, V'ishei Yisrael, where does that fit into the sentence? V'ishei Yisrael utfilatam tekabel b'ratzon. Utili ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael anecha. So on the one hand, he's saying is that, this is connected to the Beit and Shamala and Michael, who's bringing. On the other hand, he says, no, it's the Neshamot of the Tzadikim, which means. Again, we'll be very, very practical right now. More than 1,000 people were killed. They were killed for a very simple reason, because they were Jews. They were killed on what we call Kiddush Hashem. What this Tosfot is saying is that Michael stands by the Beit HaMikdash Shamala, and he brings korbanot, which means he brings the. Shall I read the words again? Midrashot chalukot yesh mi sha'omer nishmoteim shel tzadikim. What does he bring to God? He shows them the souls of the righteous, and then he says, "V'hainu damrina b'shmona esrei b'avodah v'ishei Yisrael utfilatam mira be'avat tikaber b'ratzon." What is the ishei Yisrael? It's the fire, the burnt Israel. The ishei Yisrael, which means, is it the korbanot of Israel? We don't have korbanot right now. Or is it all future-oriented, saying, please build the Beit HaMikdash against it? No, he's saying, no. He's saying, please find favorable, please accept the korbanot that was already brought and create an incredible change because of it. Which means he's saying is that the Beit HaMikdash Shamala is functional. There is a malach there, and he goes and presents in front of God tzaddikim who died, al Kiddush Hashem, and I'm adding that, I'm putting that in this context. And he says to God, please accept this and now change the world completely. Which means, we started today, and I said that the Mishkan is something which is very, very foreign to us. We had along the line this strange thing about the Yavot, or the Merkava, and we did not know what to do with this. I will point out that there is an important Ramban which I skipped, I didn't get to it, I didn't put in the sources, I opened it, And I wasn't sure I was going to do it. The Ramban is hard to find. In the old editions, there's an old edition, it's the last paragraph in the Ramban's commentary on Bereshit. In the new editions, which is really like the original, it's the first paragraph, the introduction to Sefer Shemot. Essentially what he's saying is that there's a link between Shemot and Bereshit, and that's the Avot. The Avot are the Merkava. And therefore, Geula doesn't take place until we have a Mishkan. Because the Mishkan that we have essentially takes us back to this point of the Avot, what do the Avot do? They connect heaven and earth. What does the Mishkan do? It connects heaven and earth. What is ultimately the goal over here is bring a little bit more heaven down over here to earth, which means you live in a physical world, and it's the world that we want spirituality. All of this, in a certain sense, you say, hold it, I didn't see that coming. I don't know how we got there. So that's what I tried to show you from the beginning. No, it was maybe a little more predictable than we actually paid attention to. Because we ended Parshat Mishpatim with various people climbing to various levels, and Moshe climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing, and we eventually get to this point that there are various visions that are being seen. Who's having visions? Well, various people are seeing visions over there. We actually noted along the way that all the way back by splitting of the sea, they saw what Yecheskel saw. Well, Yecheskel actually sees the Merkava and he sees the Beit Hamikdash. And now how separated are those two things? The Merkava maybe goes back to the Bereshit manifestation, and then you have the Mishkan or the Beit Hamikdash really being the Shemot manifestation, and those things are not as separate as we may have imagined, and that's why we go back to those verses, and Rashi keeps pointing out, oh no, this also means the Beit HaMikdash, or this also means the Beit HaMikdash, because there is a Beit HaMikdash Shamala. We saw from the Yerushalmi that when we daven, even if there's no Beit HaMikdash, we daven to that place. Why? Because it's really the same place, because the Beit, meaning even if you get, I didn't get into the argument, once the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, is that place still holy? There is a machloket about that, between the Rambam and the Ravid. That doesn't concern me. Because what it's saying is, I don't care about the place below, because the place below is connected to that place above. And the place above, that's what gets much more interesting. That place above is still functioning. That place is still functioning, so you have certain tzaddikim who try to see it, try to visualize it, try to connect to it, and they claim that they saw it. On the other hand, we see Tosfot saying that God takes the souls of those who were killed, and God says, look at these people, they died al Kiddush Hashem, these people were involved in Kedusha in this world, it's time for you to bring down the Kedusha down to this world. Which means people involved in Kedusha, now there has to be repercussions of this. So essentially we have the Sar, the Malach, the Sar Michael, Sar Gadol, functioning as a Kohen Gadol, and now we see all over the world, we focus our tefillah and they go up, and what happens when the tefillah go up? So we have this malach, as it were. Because again, I told you from the beginning, I don't understand anything I'm talking about today. So you have this malach taking all those tefillot and presenting them in front of God. Look at all the kedusha of OUisrael. Look at all the kedusha. Look at all the holiness. Look how they're trying to have this connection with heaven. And essentially what we're praying to God is accept all the korbanot that were brought already. Accept all of those korbanot. Please accept them b'ratzon. That's what b'ratzon means. Have these korbanot shake and move heaven and earth. And what we're looking for is a Kadosh Baruch Hu then to respond, and then to bring that building, which is somehow a spiritual construct, bring it back down below.